where we're already live, but we don't know yet.
Meeting's being live streamed. Okay, I guess I
Looks
can.
good. Sweet. Here we are. Luzi, thank you so much for taking the time to have this conversation.
It's my pleasure.
Well, that's already on topic. That was
No
bad.
pun intended.
Um, yeah, so I reached out to you because I was really curious to talk to you about um, your approach to embodiment and pleasure, since that's kind of what you focus on from what I've seen, and how you navigate that focus with being an entrepreneur and the stuff that is part of having a business that might not just be follow your pleasure all the time. Um, yeah, so curious where we will end up. For the people joining live, I will monitor the comments. So if you want to chime in or ask a question, something like that, I'll be tracking that. And yeah, as a first question, would you be willing to briefly introduce yourself? Like, who are you? What do you do professionally? And what is it that you love the most about what you do? Like, what lights you up about it?
Yeah, would love to. So yeah, my name is Luzi. I'm originally from Germany, spent a lot of my life in the UK. I now live in the Austrian Alps, which feels like a real homecoming. And I'm a somatic sexologist, sexological body worker, sex coach, and facilitator. And I facilitate spaces and experiences for people to connect with their pleasure and to come home to the wisdom of their bodies. And what I love most about this work is the moment when some contraction, some belief, some limiting story drops, and there's a moment of opening, and there's that moment where the eyes light up a little bit and the cheeks get a little bit flushed and the shoulders drop, and yeah, there's just like a new kind of brightness to that human. That is, yeah, I mean, I live for those moments.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Nice. Um, Two things that I appreciate about how you show up online, and just for context, this is the first time we're speaking live. Like we have some sort of how do you say, like in between connections, but haven't spoken live yet. So two things that I appreciate is one is I really love like the way that you show up on social media. It feels um not as curated as I see other people showing up, as in like, always, I don't know, posing from one specific, like I have the sense that you're trying to show the full human that you are versus, I don't know, just the sexy goddess that you are as well. And there's something relatable in it, that I also imagine is really like a relief for people. And the other thing is that to me, it seems very clear that even though, you talk a lot about pleasure, you also talk about like that the path towards more pleasure in our lives is not just through pleasure itself. Curious if there's anything you want to comment or add on these two points.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for those reflections, really receiving those. And I'm glad that it comes across that, I'm trying to, show the world that, yeah, being a whole person, including all of the shit and the limitations and the fear and the grief and the shame and the envy, and yeah, they're all parts of our shared humanity. And it's really the path of integrating these pieces and becoming whole selves is really the path to opening into more pleasure. And if we go, let's just go right in, shan't we, into kind of non-dual tantric philosophy, for example. It's really like what, well, it's finding pleasure in everything. It's finding equal pleasure, like transcendental sex and meditations, and like really going into those like beautiful ecstatic moments. and doing the dishes, going to the toilet, having a shit, cooking a meal for the kids, taking out the trash, finding equal pleasure in each moment, the divine and the mundane kind of, really falling into one. And so, of course, with that comes an acceptance of the breadth and depth of human experience and emotions, of, grief can be a very deep, intense, and ecstatic experience when we really let ourselves fall into that. And when we maybe like let go of the stories of, oh, I shouldn't be feeling this way because I should be feeling good, I should be looking more pretty or composed, and actually going to the intensity of like the heart breaking into more love, which is incredibly beautiful. So it's really, I feel like, self-pleasure and pleasure is a bit of like a misleading terminology in a way,
Yeah.
because it's like, it's not about feeling good, but it's about feeling alive in each moment, actually, in all of the different qualities.
Nice. Yeah, I was just gonna ask you, like, what do you feel is the biggest misconception about pleasure, and maybe when people come across your work?
That it's all, multiple orgasms and lots of sexiness.
Mhm.
When actually it's really, not pretty a lot of the time, and it's really
Mhm.
raw and it's really vulnerable and it's messy and it's flawed. And yeah, I I feel like that is the biggest one.
Mhm. Cool. So there's something that I've talked to with the man that I recently spoke to in this interview series, kind of bringing in the entrepreneurship lens or the marketing lens around. So with Michael, I spoke about the importance of marketing to the outcome that you're helping people accomplish versus just the process. Um, and as people, and I imagine you're one of them, who are very process oriented in their lives, like, constantly learning and growing and changing, it's
Mhm.
very easy to kind of talk mostly about the process, which makes sense from our perspective, but from the perspective of a potential client, it might not give them like a clear understanding of like, okay, where is this going? Like, why would I want to work with Luzi? But on the flip side, also not wanting to, communicate in a way that hides, that makes kind of like promises that are unrealistic, and not talking about what is needed to be able to work with you and really benefit from it. So curious to hear if there's anything you want to say around how do you navigate that?
I love that so much, and it's something I've been given a lot of thought. And it's actually a business mentor of mine, Dane Thomas. He's got it from someone else, but he said, give them market to what they want, and then give them what they need,
Yeah.
which I'm sure comes from somewhere else. But this is really the thing, on my landing page, I am, for example, really, I am letting people know that's going to be working with the emotions and with the nervous system, etc., etc. But I'm also gonna, yeah, of course, share about the how I am feeling in my body now and how I'm feeling in my life, how I'm relating, and all of the benefits that I've reaped. And I'm not really sharing in depth the many blockages and the many challenges and the depth of falling apart that this work can also bring. We're moving into it slowly, but it's challenging. And you'll be meeting all of your blocks and the deepest shame and all of that. And I'm hinting at it, but mainly I'm like, hey, do you want to have a life where you feel more connected to your body and you feel like you can communicate authentically about your desires, etc.? And I feel like there's something in that. And this is something I see on social media. It's where people, like, are you selling a product, and are you serving your client and, letting them know this is, what these tools you'll be learning through the product do? Or are you hijacking the product actually to showcase your own process?
Mhm.
And so, like, especially in this type of works, I'm not going to be on Instagram crying into the camera every single day, no shame around like emotional catharsis and sharing the vulnerability of that. But am I serving my clients with that? Of course, if I do that once every blue moon, it's like showing the clients, hey, I'm a person, I've got emotions and I'm vulnerable. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
But if it's like, oh, and when this happened and my trauma and my childhood, it's like, are you just utilizing your online presence to actually process your own shit? Like,
Mhm.
go get therapy, So it's finding that balance, I feel like, between the two of like what learnings from my own process are useful,
Yeah.
to share, and when actually it's like, hey, and this is where I am now.
Yeah. Yeah, I love this topic. I talk to my partner about this a lot, that um it's kind of related to what you were saying, that I often see people share like an insight or something that they had that's so fresh, like that literally like just happened, and they talk about it like it's not made transparent. That's like, hey, I just, like this just came up for me and like this is where I'm at, but it's more of like, oh, I learned something and I'm already in teaching mode, and that it creates this kind of like it's just not it's not clean. It's like it's so intertwined with the person's own process. But they're already turning it into like I'm an authority, sharing a deep insight. That is, I think, one of the reasons why at least most people that I'm talking to are really turned off by social media and the way people show themselves is, yeah, like
Mhm.
their own process. I guess there's not enough clarity on like what is their own process and where they're at themselves, and what is really being fully of service in terms of sharing with people, and the having something embodied already before sharing it.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. And I feel like that is something that, especially in the kind of, sexuality, sensuality, feminine embodiment scene, all that kind of stuff, yeah, there is a lot of kind of showcasing of process and of learning and of knowledge that hasn't quite been embodied, and like terminology being used in a certain way because it's hot and it's popping and everyone's using it.
Yeah.
And there is a certain, I guess, like, I feel like gestation process from, for example, an idea, for a program or for a new product coming up, and then really trialing it and, really being with that practice. I think, this is really something that I've built, got a self-pleasure online course, and that's kind of the heart piece of my work. I spent 122 days in a row of self-pleasuring every single day for 1 hour. And that was my sex lab that I did. And it was the wildest time of my life, where I basically gathered all of the knowledge that then a year later I put into a free offering that I just shared with friends. I was like, hey, I'm doing this thing. Shall we just do it together? It
Mm.
was just like, I didn't even think that I was going to make it into a product. And then a year later, I put it into like a paid product for the first time. But it was really that process of, okay, I found something which feels incredibly alive and which I
Mm.
know has such benefit I've experienced in my own body, but letting it ripen and really like letting it get to the point where it's like, okay, I've had the embodied experience. Perhaps I've also sought out some additional like knowledge and frameworks and technologies that can support what I'm already experiencing, and then offering it, yeah, exactly, as opposed to like, I went to this one ritual and had this, out of body experience, and now here I am offering that
Now
as
I'm a shaman.
yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And on the flip side, I also know a lot of people um who feel like they don't know enough yet to be able to share, where I'm like, bro, you're,
Mhm.
probably more knowledgeable than like 90% of the people who are positioning themselves as authorities in your field. So it's, yeah, it's very double-edged, and
It's such a fine line, isn't it? Who
you
needs to eat a bit more humble pie and who needs to come out of their shell a bit more?
yeah.
Yeah.
Um, you show, I mean, you show a lot of yourself, both physically, but also, I mean, you share things that you're going through. Like it feels like you don't hold back. You've had your fair share of challenges in terms of meeting the criteria of social media in terms of what's acceptable to show and what isn't. And I'm
Mm.
really curious to hear um, how how does it feel for you to be this, let's say, naked in front of like the unknown public. I'm guessing there are, lots of people following your content who you don't even know they're watching. Um, yeah, like how did you come to this place that it feels, I'm assuming, good and enjoyable to show yourself in this way?
Mm. Dying a thousand deaths.
Hmm.
Yeah, a lot of fear in relation to letting myself be seen and the consequences of that. And it's interesting because it's not that long ago. It's been a couple of years now that I've been sharing in this quality on social media. And I remember that actually the first time it was a newsletter. I sent out a newsletter and I asked all of my friends to subscribe to my newsletter. So there was like a humble audience of 50 people who would receive my newsletter, who all already loved me.
Hmm.
And I sent out the newsletter, which was like a vulnerable share of my, starting to work in sexuality and the experiences I was having, and me kind of sharing about this publicly for the first time. And I remember clicking send, and I felt sick to my stomach. I thought I was going to vomit onto my laptop, and I closed the laptop and I walked out the house in the middle of the night. It was like 11:30 at night, pitch black. And I was just like, oh my God, what have I done? What have I done? They're going to come for me. Everyone's going to ridicule me. All of those things were coming up, and to go into more perhaps like another layer of that, having dreams about being burned at the stake, people
Hmm.
coming after me with pitchforks, the whole witch wound thing coming in, where, before I was a bit like, oh yeah, people talking about this thing. And then I was experiencing it in my own body of people are going to come for me and they're going to silence me. That's going to be happening if I'm not careful. And of course, the kind of social media censorship playing into that very wound of, women talking about pleasure and sexuality specifically. I mean, I don't think it's actually gender specific, but there is something like archetypal within that. Um, so I had to, yeah, just be with and face all of those layers and the, many blockages I felt around my own voice, the shame of, like people like criticizing me, not loving me, all of like my people pleasing tendencies, what will people think of me? And of course, worse than everything else, what if people won't care?
Hmm.
What if no one will give a shit about what I'm sharing? Which of course is the worst because it's my heart and my soul, right? And what I felt, how it got to the point was really like intensity and tension building of I know I've got something of value in me to share. And even admitting that felt so fucking edgy a couple of years ago. It's like, who are you? Who are
Yeah.
you to share anything with anyone? But the tension almost getting to a point of it being unbearable. And then me looking at other people on social media being like, what you're sharing isn't good enough. What you're sharing isn't good enough. It's like, oh, okay. So all of this judgment I'm developing is only the mirror of because you're not bloody sharing what you want to be sharing. And as soon as I started sharing, it's like, oh, I love what everyone else is sharing because everyone's got their own voice and like, oh, acceptance is back. But
Hmm.
the frustration and the projection that I was building within myself because I didn't let myself share my voice, and yeah, realizing how many limitations I had to move through in order to get to that place. And I'm a Leo, and like part of my I feel like dharma is being in a leadership role and using my voice. There's if I look at my astrology, it's like, yeah, of course that was always meant to be that way. I'm in my late 30s now, and for a long time I denied that aspect of myself of actually letting myself be seen and letting myself be seen in the nakedness of my body. I did my first naked photo shoot when I was 12 or 13 because I always
Hmm.
loved to show myself in that way and to own, my radiance and my beauty, and to not feel like I need to, hide it because it's dangerous or because people are going to take advantage of me, but to be like, oh no, actually this is a gift and I can celebrate this. Owning that was a big one. And then also, of course, the sleazy messages that come with that and all of that stuff, and just letting it, letting that kind of run off my back.
Mm.
And I guess really reclaiming the innocence. I feel like the physical nakedness and the emotional nakedness go hand in hand. I've got no interest in being some, you know, polished advertising model that you know, doesn't have anything else going on, but it's like pure aesthetic. But yeah, like there is beauty and there is
Mm.
aesthetic, of course, and there's also just like a realness of a human being and
Mm.
an aliveness that comes out of that human being, and showing that, I feel like, is what I really love and what I would love to see more of in the world, people of all genders, not just women.
Beautiful. Yeah, I love this the combination of owning and celebrating your beauty, and because I think the trap that I think more women than men can fall into, but I guess it applies to anyone, is like if you're being appreciated a lot for your beauty, then of course like you start um overemphasizing that and like hiding the part, like you just kind of like respond to the feedback that you get. So like those kind of like this kind of dynamic of following more what is being wanted than what feels true for you, which I mean is quite the challenge because you do have a business and you do want to have a large reach, but yeah, you can't sacrifice your integrity and turn into a persona that is not representative of who you are in an unconscious way. I think that's gonna fall fall back onto you. I do think that anyone who has a presence online, like to some degree, it's always going to be a performance,
Mhm.
and we cannot avoid that. And I do also think, and this has been something I've been thinking about a lot in terms of like me projecting some perfection onto people that I follow on social media, like me as a follower of someone, I have a responsibility as well in terms of how do I perceive this person? Like it goes both ways. It's not just that the creators have to, um, always be authentic to the fullest degree and so on. Like that's one side, but the other is I, as a viewer or follower, I have a responsibility as well to be aware of, my own projections and anything that comes up in the process. Like realizing that has been kind of freeing for me as a creator to be like, no matter how I show up online, there's always going to be people thinking this or thinking that in either way, like thinking, whoa, this, putting me on a pedestal or pulling me down. Like it's always gonna be part of the game.
Yeah, totally. I really love you touching on that because I feel like it's I'm really like mindful of the balance between, yeah, there's certain things I want to sell, right? And there are certain things that I know will work in order to sell the thing.
Mhm.
And then finding a balance of utilizing those tools at the time, when I'm in a launch phase of a course or whatever, but really like doing it in a way that stays true to my expression of my creativity, but then also always coming back to, okay, what is actually the stuff that I want to post as opposed to the stuff that I know will work, which I feel like I've cracked the criteria for that now. It's like 10 to 15-second reels, three things to, etc. And it works, and I get so bored by that. So maybe I want to post a poem, or I want to post about, I don't know, the thing I've had for dinner. And I know that, it's the thing that disrupts the algorithm, but just being like, okay, fuck it. I want to be showing up here authentically.
Yeah.
And also this kind of just touching back on the projections and, how are we actually being perceived. And I find that so interesting to hear from people. I was out in Thailand and Bali for a couple of months, obviously, like the epicenter of like the neo spiritual scene. I had quite a few people come to me like, oh, I know you from Instagram. And I was like, whoa, this is so weird. And them kind of assuming that they knew me, or they were then entitled to being like really friendly with me. And I was a bit like, whoa, I don't know you. And also I share very vulnerable on social media, and there's also so many things that you don't know. I had a huge relationship breakdown last year that I didn't share anything about because it was too raw and too sacred for me to plaster it all over Instagram. That was, the biggest part of my life last year that no one knew about, that who wasn't my friend. So it's also like, taking it with a pinch of salt. And I love that piece that you brought in around having a responsibility as a consumer as well.
Mm, nice. Yeah, I can relate to, like, I did a larger online summit 6 years ago, and then I mean, not very often, but I had people in Vienna approach me and like be like, "Hey, I know you," and it's so surreal because
Mm.
also when people started working with me who knew me just from my online presence, it was like this weird one-sided thing of like they felt like they knew me really well, but I had never interacted with them.
Mm.
And I mean, I do think some things do come across in our online presence. Um, it's just never complete.
Mhm.
There's one other piece that I wanted to mention. So I did a social media strategy masterclass recently. No, it's not coming up. Anyway, maybe it'll come back later. Um, well, one other thing that I'm curious about is obviously you have I mean, I don't know any details, but it looks like your business is flourishing. I know people signing up, like I know people who are joining your stuff and seem to be enjoying it. Um, what is it that helped you, um, yeah, in this phase of establishing yourself in the field that you're working in, growing your business, like anything that you're willing to share there in terms of strategies, structures, mentorship that helped you get to where you are?
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, that's really what's been at the kind of focus of my attention really for the last couple of years, because it felt like up until that point it was really, honing my craft in many ways. And of course I continue to do that and continue the learning and the studying, the practicing, but felt like there was a level of expertise that I'd gotten to where, now I have a lot to share, and how do I package that and how do I sell it? And the absolute most important thing that helps me get, over the many blockages and the mind fucking and the is it good enough, the pressure of a launch phase, etc., is connecting to my pleasure every single day and having embodied practice as a non-negotiable.
Mhm.
There is nothing that will relax a really kind of, oh God, the to-do list and all of the things and that post and gotta sales, then dropping into my body for half an hour, 45 minutes, and really coming back to the why and the bigger purpose and the vision, and wanting to be of service and being in the generosity of service and coming into that vibration of overflow in my own body of like, oh, I'm feeling juicy, I'm feeling alive, my heart is open, there's like erotic energy flowing through my body. And in that moment, it doesn't actually fucking matter how many sales I get. And because I come back to, I'm in service here of something else that really matters to me. And actually, I'm willing to give it for free because I know it's worth. And it's that energy that I feel like people feel in me, and they respond to that because I'm like, look, this is shit hot and I'm doing this anyway. Come on board if you want to. And if you don't, it doesn't actually matter. So I feel like that kind of like scarcity thing that can come up in, I can feel scarcity in someone's body when I read their copy. I can just, you can smell it, if that person is desperate to sell you something. So yeah, I like coming into my body every day. There is a sense of overflow that I'm working with. And if I lose that, I'll stop marketing for a few days and I go to the spa, I nourish myself, I, you know, cuddle my friends, I'm in nature, I do whatever it takes to get myself back into a resource nervous system and into a sense of I'm actually enjoying it. If I stop enjoying it, then I need to stop marketing that very minute.
Mhm.
And with that, of course, comes there are some things that are non-negotiable. And I've worked out how to do that because that's what I found really difficult in the beginning. I was like, okay, but some days I really don't want to, and it might take some days, but I'm also starting this thing in 2 weeks. And if I don't send something out now, then I won't get people on board.
Yeah.
And that's why I felt like two things have really supported me. One of them is batching content. Um,
Mm.
my friend and business mentor Dane calls it a content orgy, which I love. So, you know, just spending a day face on camera, recording reels and having that ready to go out. That's the one thing. So I know that when I'm in that lack, I can even just like send that to my assistant to put together and send out. And that's the second thing of like getting a team, getting support, you know, or so in that kind of lone wolf thing in the beginning of, you know, it's my transmission and I got to do it all by myself, and having a team to support me and take over some of the things, just the relaxation of I'm not having to hold it all by myself, and there's someone who knows the structures of my business and who I can say on a day of, you know, today I'm bleeding or I'm having whatever kind of day, can you just take care of this? So supporting myself by, you know, like paying into the bank beforehand with inspiration and building the structures which will hold me when I've just got to relax and be.
Wow, cool. Um, at which point, because obviously like having a team is also a financial investment. So um, yeah, I personally definitely don't recommend doing that unless you know to some degree that you can generate that income, because I think that's one of the risks that we as entrepreneurs can fall into is like taking on a lot of uh, burdens on some level or responsibilities. And then it creates more and more pressure, and then it's hard to create from a place of ease because we're like, well, like, if this doesn't work out, then I'm kind of fucked. So,
Mhm.
at which point did you decide to get that kind of support? Like, was
Mhm.
that kind of like a leap of faith, or was that based on like, okay, looking back, I can see that I can generate this amount of income, and so it feels sort of safe to do that?
Yeah, definitely not so much a leap of faith, but more just an act of desperation of
Hmm.
I am sitting in front of my laptop until 2 a.m. every single day, and I
Oh, wow.
still can't get on top of, you know, responding to everyone and doing one of the
Uh,
things that need doing. You know, there's more demand than what I can meet.
hmm,
So I need someone. It's not possible to do this
hmm,
just by one person, and it limits me. Yeah, and at that point, you know, I was already financially like sustainable enough to be able to do that. And you know, it started slowly. It was, you know, having a person for a couple of hours a week, you know, in the beginning,
hmm.
and then also like trialing out a few people, realizing, you know, which ones it worked with, which didn't work with. Definitely working with two or three people, I was like, actually this, you know, I didn't communicate clearly what I needed, and actually that person isn't suitable, until I really landed, you know, with someone where, yeah, and that now it's really like a weaning process for me as well, to hand over more and more things and hand over more responsibility. And I feel like that's really to go into like a maybe more esoteric way of looking at business, which I find quite interesting, of when the business and the transmission of the business becomes more of an entity that
Hmm.
actually starts growing in its own way, and how can I serve that, as opposed to being like it's my baby and it's mine, you know, the that kind of thing, but just being like how can I tend to it and get other people on board who can also tend to it, And then what does it develop into, even to the point where maybe one day I'll hand it over and step away from it, certain aspects of it, and letting it go, as opposed to being like, this is my thing, I've got to claw into.
Yeah, cool. It's fascinating to me how unique each person's or like how unique it is what works for people in their business and what doesn't. Like, for example, I've like some of my business mentors, and the same for me, like they say for them batching content doesn't work at all. And for me also, it doesn't really. Like I feel like when I look at the content that I've batched before, I can just see that the response is so much lower, and I like it just doesn't work for me. And it actually it was a relief to hear that, one of my business mentors who's just super financially successful said like, yeah, it doesn't work for me either. Like I just show up every day and create when I feel the inspiration to be like, ah, that's also possible. Like to kind of like broaden the range of like
Mm-hmm.
what do you have to do in order to have like a super well working business to be like, play your game, do what works for you, perfect
Mm-hmm.
your craft, and you will succeed. And ultimately, you have to, or you really want to find a way that is really enjoyable for you,
Mm-hmm.
because like you can succeed in a lot of ways, but if your joy gets lost on the path, it sucks. It sucks really bad. Like sometimes I
Mm-hmm.
think it's 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 almost worse to be really successful with something that you're not enjoying than to fail with it, because it's really hard to let go of something that is going well. Like the kind of struggle that you're in of like, yeah, but this is working really well. Yeah, but I really don't like it. Like that's a really tough place to be in. So sometimes I'm quite grateful when things don't work out, and in retrospect, I'm like, thank God. Like I really didn't want to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, and just like one thing that popped into my mind as you were speaking about, like the batching content, like does it work, does it not work? What I feel like, with sharing on social media, self-pleasure practice, I mean, they're all kind of in a way different expressions of creative practice, right? And I'm thinking about like writing a book, for example. What do you need? Of course, you need to show up every single day and need to write
Yeah.
and just like trust into the creative flow. And, sometimes maybe you're just writing garbage and then that's part of that. And at the same time, you also got to trust that the stuff that you've written, which is in the past, is still going to be hot. So I feel like there's a kind of balance in terms of like sharing on social media of, if I have a moment where I feel like, okay, I've got shit to say today and I know it's going to be really live, it's going to be juicy. I'm just feeling that if I capture that, that's still going to feel alive, like a couple of weeks later or whatever.
Mhm.
And at the same time, of course, the spontaneity in the moment is sometimes the thing that produces the best results. So I don't feel like it's necessarily, do we batch content, do we produce in the moment, but like what is the level of aliveness and passion that we can bring across
Yeah.
at any given point.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think that's my challenge when I try to batch content. Just like after the third video I create, I'm like, I'm done. I'm not, I don't want to do this anymore. Um, are there any other kind of structure strategies in your business besides like the delegating that you were talking about and the batching content and connecting to pleasure? Like, is there anything else that you feel like has been a key component for you on your journey?
Sex magic
Hmm.
has been an invaluable business tool because I feel like it brings together, the vision, the clarity of, maybe this is how many people I want to get onto the course, or this is how much money I want to make in this quarter,
Hmm.
or this is the kind of impact that I want to have, which are all quite like practical, like strategic goals and numbers and,
Hmm.
quite like mindy and dry maybe in some ways. But having those and holding those and creating ritual spaces where we can really connect to those intentions and to those business goals, so to say, but open the body in a self-pleasure practice and connecting to erotic energy as a way to really bring these intentions alive, as opposed to just like writing down, on my sheet, this is, I need to make 20 sales for this thing, but just to connect to the feeling in the body of how would it feel to meet these 20
Mm,
incredible humans and connect with them and
mhm,
share this with them. How would that feel in my body? How might this ripple out into their families and relationships and communities?
mm,
How much more love and joy can there be through that? And really feeling the resonance of that in my body and connecting the two, the vision and the erotic aliveness in my body, which of course, if we want to name it like that, is the practice of manifestation, of sex magic, is to connect, the visionary aspect with the love of the heart and with the creative power of the genitals and the womb,
mhm,
or the balls, and to bring all of those into alignment is really what I feel like works really well, because there's a clarity, and it really comes into like the love and the passion for what we do, and bringing those together is what vibrates differently in a business, I feel.
mhm. Cool. Yeah, I'm glad you're bringing it in. I'm just remembering that that's one thing I wanted to talk to you about like as well. Yeah, I really like this practice. I actually use it as well.
Mm.
Um, yeah, I do. Oh, and there's so many nuances there to talk about. Like, I think for me, I really like to look at things super pragmatically, even though I'm probably quite woo-woo, but for me, this only works if I also really take action. Like if
Mhm.
I if I just like pleasure myself all day, for me, it's not going to work. It might be that for certain setups, it really does, but that's like one of the misunderstandings that I see when it comes to this and any kind of manifesting, actually, that it's like just the act of connecting to the desire, that's it. And that's not my experience. For me, it's like I have this part, which is like the energetic part, which obviously in most of the business world is entirely missing. Like most of the business world is just strategy. But then in like the more spiritual communities, it can be like a lot of emphasis on this and not so much like the very practical, cool, I want this amount of people in. How can I actually make that happen? How many people approximately would I need to contact based on like the data that I have of, how many people join an invitation that I send out? Like if that's not there, I find this ineffective, and then it can also become kind of frustrating to be like, but I felt it. I felt it so much. Like it was so real. Like why didn't it happen?
Yeah, I'm totally with you. It's like you're not just gonna lie there and masturbate and things will magically happen. You've
Yeah.
also just got to sit your ass down and do the work.
Yeah.
Yeah, to find the balance and to, set some goals of, I'm gonna post on Instagram and Facebook 3 times this week. I'm gonna send one newsletter. I'm gonna post into these 10 WhatsApp groups or
Yeah.
Facebook groups or whatever. I'm gonna reach out to 10 people to sell to directly and send them my offer.
Yeah.
I'm going to go on one podcast, whatever it might be. Yeah, to have the really, really practical steps alongside the mystical manifestation practice. Yeah, very, very important. And I guess to again just like find the balance of, okay, I've been just spending hours in front of my laptop every day, and I'm hammering out the messaging, and at some point I'm feeling a little bit dry
Yeah.
within me, going back to the practice, and like I'm feeling juicy, I'm in overflow because I've been connecting to my body. Now sit down and channel that into sending those goddamn emails.
Yeah. And for me, it also has a lot to do with two things. So one is the sense of agency, the sense of like, okay, there are actual steps that I can take. Like that feels like an essential part of just feeling empowered and feeling like cool. Like there's like instead of being like, well, I did this now, let me just wait and see what happens. which can be an empowered place, but it can also be like this kind of victim thing of like, well, I did everything I could. Now it's up to something else to be like, cool, like what can I do? Um, yeah, something else might come up later, but that feels really important that I don't know, like to me, that's what creates space and aliveness in me if I'm always connected to this, like, hey, it's in my power. Oh, and
Hmm.
this is the other thing that I wanted to say is how then like the results actually come can be completely different from what I thought. Like it's not like, oh, like I take these linear steps and these are the results. Like I take these steps and then something entirely different happens. And that's what gets me the results. But it's still not like, the my steps were futile or something. It was more like, well, the way that life then comes back can take so many different ways. But like staying in this, what can I do practically? And then I'm like open and receptive to super unexpected ways that things actually work out in my way.
Yeah, totally. I was just thinking, I was doing all of these free masterclasses a few months ago to, like increase engagement and get some new people on board for my course. And then I got so terribly shadow banned from it that, I was just losing followers by the day. And like, I wasn't reaching anyone with my content. And I was like, oh God. But then the people who I did get into the masterclasses, especially interestingly, the cock and the anal massage masterclass,
Mhm.
the many of the men who came really loved my transmission and then sent it to loads of their like girlfriends or wives or
Nice.
partners who then came and joined my course. So it was this kind of like
Yeah,
roundabout thing of like, oh, it did get there in the end, but not in the expected way.
nice. Yeah, that's a good example. Sweet.
Mm.
Cool. Well, we're coming to a close of this lovely conversation. As we're wrapping up, yeah, I would love for you to share like anything that's coming up in your world that you would like people to know about. Yeah, and we'll also add any kind of ways that people can stay in touch with you as well, somewhere around this video.
Mm. Beautiful. Yeah, I'm just completing my online course. That's going to be a new version of that, which is going to be starting on the 1st of October, so a little while away, but you can add yourself to the wait list, which means you get an exclusive super early bird discount as well. And then I've got a couple of retreats coming up, one called The Initiation in German. It's going to be happening next week, actually, the week after, starting on the 4th of June. One spot free. And then I've got another retreat called Juice the Immersion
Mhm.
in Portugal, 26th of June to 2nd of July. There's 2 spots still available. And then I run regular temple nights here in Austria in Salzburg. So there's a Telegram group community that you can join. Yeah, that's the next things that are coming up.
Beautiful. And if people want to reach out to you with a question or something, what's the best place to reach you?
Instagram is always quite good, and via my Instagram, you find my link tree with all of my offerings and email and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, that's kind of where I live mainly.
Awesome. Cool. Well, we'll get your Insta somewhere around this video. Hey, thank you so much for taking the time. This was a lot of fun. I can see ourselves doing a follow-up at some point.
Mm,
Um, yeah, have a beautiful evening.
thank you. I enjoyed this.